It's Thursday, it's 12:15 and we're live in Westminster. Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak faced a grilling last night, but did we learn anything new? The Labour Party releases its manifesto with a pledge to prioritise wealth creation.
I am proud, in this place, in this city, to launch Labour's general election manifesto, a manifesto for wealth creation, a plan to change Britain.
Plaid Cymru have also launched their manifesto, but do they still have ambitions for independence?
I'm proud to stand on a platform which offers a positive vision for our country, a real alternative to the increasingly joined-up thinking of the two main UK parties.
And we're in Clitheroe Market. This is an area that traditionally has always voted Conservative, but this time round Labour will be gunning for it. And what about the threat of reform? We'll be finding out what voters make of it all.
Joining us today, former Conservative Minister Paul Scully, Labour's Shadow Armed Forces Minister Luke Pollard, columnist at the newspaper and former Labour policy advisor Andrew Fisher, and international editor of Talk TV Isabel Oakeshott. This is Politics Live Election 2024. So, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer faced pretty tough questions from an audience in Grimsby Town Hall last night as part of a TV election programme on Sky News with Beth Rigby. Let's play you two of the key and slightly awkward moments for both leaders.
I admired how in touch you were with the public when you were obviously a solicitor and then you became Director of Public Prosecutions with CPS. But over the last year, I feel like you've formed into more of a politician than the person that I would have voted for to run the country. You seem more like a political robot. How are you going to convince others like me to vote for you?
Well, the most... Look,
I'm a former Conservative Party chair and a lifelong true blue, but in this election I find myself an undecided voter. Actions taken by this government actually make me feel ashamed. You left David Cameron at the D-Day celebrations to represent our country. To me, this feels like a deliberate action, as you know that your ratings in the polls are so low. How do you plan to rebuild the public trust in you, or is it already irreparable?
Well, Amy, thank you. Well, thank you for all your previous volunteering and service to the party. And when it comes to D-Day, as I said, I absolutely did not mean to cause any offence or hurt. That was not my intention.
What did last night's interviews and audience interaction that you saw a flavour of there reveal about the two men who want the keys to number 10, Paul?
Well, I think you know it's more of what we've seen the campaign roll out, that Rishi is trying to sort of talk about what has happened and how the plan's working, and more of the same in terms of the way the economy is starting to turn. He's not yet really, I don't think, articulating the vision that some of us have been wanting to see, and that's where you see the frustration from the member in there. But you then get.
But they were about mistakes. She was frustrated about mistakes.
Well, indeed. But then you get
said.
Keir Starmer sort of holding them in vase, as people have described it. He's sort of trying not to drop it because he's going to win by default. That's the risk that we're seeing.
What do you think, Luke? Did you learn anything new? What did it say about Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak last night?
Well, I liked the format last night. I really liked how the audience got a bit bigger say in what's going on. But I thought Keir did really well, actually. I thought he managed to present a positive, hopeful vision for the country. But I think he also set out the real big challenges. So if we win the general election in 3 weeks' time, and that's still a big if for us, we're taking nothing for granted, then we'll be inheriting a country where there's not a lot of money available for the public services, where the trust is through the floor, and rebuilding our economy, getting it back up and running so we can use that money for our public services is going to be a big challenge. And I think he set it out quite well as to what is the big challenges facing us in the coming years ahead.
We're going to talk in some detail, of course, about the Labour manifesto. Did it reveal anything to you, Andrew, as a Labour insider, if you like, who worked for Jeremy Corbyn?
I think it revealed that the interview format is far better than the head-to-head debate, and that being scrutinised by a journalist is better for the viewer. And actually, I think, as Luke said, actually being interviewed by the crowd, the audience, was better as well. They asked some very good questions that stumped the politicians as well, just as Beth
They were
Rigby
quite
did.
personal, weren't they, the questions? They sort of got to the heart of...
And I think it expressed people's frustrations with the state of the country and people's frustrations with the state of politics at the moment. There's not a lot of enthusiasm for either. And, you saw the polling afterwards. Keir Starmer, judged by nearly 2/3 to have won the debate. But it's almost by default. It's, the Tories are really bad, and there's just this mood to get rid of them. It doesn't matter whether it's the Lib Dems or Reform. People are just splintering in every direction almost because they want the Tories out. And Labour hasn't really enthused people, and there wasn't a lot there to inspire people, but it was still better than what Rishi Sunak offered, and that's enough.
Was it revealing to you, Isabel?
We saw the robot fail, didn't we? He was asked whether he's a bit robotic, and then that wasn't in the script, and there was a horrible, awkward pause there. I found his answers to a lot very waffly.
Keir Starmer's, this
Keir
is.
Starmer. I also was concerned that he failed to answer repeatedly the question as to whether he meant it when he said in the run-up to a previous election that Jeremy Corbyn would make a great Prime Minister. He repeatedly dodged that question. Why not just be honest? And voters don't like that. That's not to say that I thought Rishi Sunak was any more impressive. He clearly is never going to get away from this disastrous D-Day blunder. I think he looks like a hunted man.
Yeah, on the issue of Jeremy Corbyn, Keir Starmer said in 2019, to repeat the question, that Jeremy Corbyn would make a great Prime Minister. But last night he said he was certain that Labour were going to lose the general election. What did that say to you as someone who worked for Jeremy Corbyn? Did you ever question Keir Starmer's commitment to the Corbyn project?
Look, I think it's no secret he wasn't, one of the inside, people on the left of the party. He never has been. I think that we all knew that. And, Jeremy Corbyn, right from the start, actually, especially at the start, tried to build a broad cabinet that represented the full breadth of the Labour Party. And, in fact, Luke served on the shadow front bench as well. So, we had people from all wings of the party trying to pull them together. So it's not any surprise. Keir Starmer saying, I thought we were going to lose the 2019 election. Yeah, so did I. But that's not a great revelation. Everyone did. Look at the polls.
But it suggests that he felt he could say anything then at that time, knowing he was going to lose the election, because he didn't actually have to say that Corbyn was going to make a great Prime Minister. He went through 2 elections with him.
You ask any cabinet member now, is Rishi Sunak a great Prime Minister? They're not going to say no, are they? Of course they're going to say yes. Even if they're all set, they're going, God, he's a disaster. Which I think they all are. But
nonetheless, as I say, he went through 2 general elections with Jeremy Corbyn. He sat on the front bench with him all of that time. He sat on 2 manifestos of his, supported 2 manifestos of him. Clearly didn't believe any of it.
Let's just show people the new manifesto, or at least 10 pages of it, because it is actually 135 pages long. But you can see there is Keir Starmer with his sleeves rolled up. It's just been launched in Manchester. Let's have a listen to some of what he had to say.
We have a plan in this manifesto, a total change of direction, laser focused on our cause: stability, growth, investment and reform. A government back in the service of your family, ready to change Britain. So I make no apologies for being careful with working people's money, and no apologies for ruling out tax rises on working people. So let me spell it out. We will not raise income tax. We will not raise national insurance. We will not raise VAT. That is a manifesto commitment.
Now, we've heard that repeatedly from Keir Starmer. Before we get into the substance of it, we were also told no surprises. Paul Scully used the Ming vase metaphor, cautious first. Do we really know, even on the back of this manifesto, which, of course, I haven't had time to read, but we know an awful lot of the content. We can see here some of the questions being asked in the warm-up from that manifesto launch. Do we know how Labour is going to govern under Keir Starmer if you win this election based on this document?
Yes, I think we do. It's very clearly set out not only what a mission-led government looks like, trying to not only invest but reform the way that Britain is run, but then setting out the 6 first steps as to what we want to do immediately: hiring more teachers, getting economic stability in there, tackling antisocial behaviour, cutting waiting lists. We've made a real clear sense of what you will get straight away. And that is in stark contrast to the Conservatives with their unfunded myriad of policies that don't hang together, don't present a positive vision of the future of our country. And that's deliberately what Labour has not done. Every single one of our policies is costed. Every single one is funded in the manifesto. No new tax rises are needed to deliver anything in the manifesto. But we've also set a direction of travel which is different from the short-term sticking plasters that we've seen over the last 14 years to something, I think, better, hopeful, and hopefully a way of restoring trust in our politics and growth in our economy.
Is it ambitious enough?
No, nowhere near enough. And you look at what just take the IFS for example. They say there are 19 billion pounds worth of cuts. Yeah. They say there's 19 billion pounds worth of cuts coming down the line on unprotected departments. Now, Labour's manifesto raises 7 billion, all of which is hypothecated into some very good policies, by the way. Things like mental health counsellors in schools, free breakfast clubs, all very good, but nothing that's going to actually fund public services, sort the shortages, the backlogs, and refund them. We've got massive backlogs in the courts. There's no extra money for that. We've got huge issues of recruitment and retention around teachers, social care workers, junior doctors, nurses. There's no extra money for that. So, no, it doesn't solve any of those sort of things. And actually what it looks like is another round of austerity is baked in.
But it's an election-winning document?
No. So, look, I'm sorry to say that I thought Sir Keir Starmer's manifesto launched today was really, really good. I listened to the whole thing.
You don't have to be afraid.
There was very little... Well, let me come to why that worries me. There was very little in what he said that I could disagree with. So he talked endlessly about wealth creation, about growth, but it is what he doesn't say that concerns me. So there's no pledge there not to raise corporation tax. There's no pledge there not to raise capital gains tax. He's banging on about non-doms and pursuing people of great wealth. The reality is that wealth creators are leaving this country. I don't just mean billionaires and multimillionaires. Ordinary professionals are leaving this country.
But is that as a result of Conservative? Not as a result of Conservative.
Of what is coming down the track.
Well, Luke,
we all like to hear, by the way, about the plans on cutting NHS waiting lists, your 40,000 extra appointments, your extra teachers. Where are you going to find the people? I hear about the money. Where are you going to find the people?
Well, let's start with Isabel's first point, which is about tax. We've talked an awful lot about tax, about it being ruled out by both main parties, but not capital gains tax, not a re-evaluation of council tax and homes in council tax bans. I think there are no plans to do those things. The others, the headline taxes, are ruled out. So there could be plans in the next Parliament, if you win the election, to raise capital gains tax, for example.
What we've said, and just to correct as well, we've ruled out increase in corporation tax.
Yes, corporation tax is staying.
And so no increases in income tax, VAT, national insurance or corporation tax. What we've also said is that everything we want to deliver in our manifesto is fully funded, fully costed, and does not require any additional taxes to deliver. That's really important because we want to go into this election with a manifesto that people can look at and trust and know it can be delivered in the way that we're setting out that it can be delivered. Because the way we restore trust in our politics is not by making unfunded promises, tax cuts or spending as the Conservatives are doing, which frankly will only put up interest rates, and that means families being hit with increased mortgage costs, 4,800 our estimation over the course of a Parliament. It's by setting out clearly what we promise to do and how we will pay for it. Now, because the Tories have crashed the economy, there's not as much money about to deliver all the things that we would have liked to have done. Right. That is very clear. We know the economic inheritance is going to be really tough and really hard. So we're only promising what we know we can deliver.
Right, well, that's on tax. But what about spending cuts? So the other side of the ledger is that if you are ruling out all these taxes and you have no plans to raise some of the others, there have to be swinging spending cuts. The front page of the Eye, Labour set to announce big cuts to public services in the UK, because you can't have both. You can't have no spending cuts, no tax increases and no extra borrowing in order to do what you want to do.
I think he has been very clear in his manifesto launch that we reject utterly that idea. We've got to put growth back into our economy. We've got to put growth. For the last 14 years, we've been bumbling along at low growth with high taxes. It's been the worst combination for our economy. People are genuinely struggling. That's why, unapologetically, our entire manifesto is focused on building growth into our economy, not just in the southeast of England, but in every single part of our country. That's the way that we generate the tax revenues to invest in our public services. That's the way we correct the damage that's been done over the last 14 years. But it's going to take some time.
Just to get your response, is that reassuring in terms of...
The other thing that really worried me about the manifesto launch today is not once did Sir Keir Starmer mention the number one problem in this country right now, which is uncontrolled immigration. Now, you'll say,
but it's the number one, hang on, it's the number one issue, but not for everybody. It might be your number one issue.
It's not even in the top 10 for Labour voters.
Well, OK, Labour voters may have a very different view.
But make your point.
OK, very high up in any poll you will find everybody is concerned about immigration. I know that he's talked about smashing the criminal gangs. Is that it? I mean, he won't put any numbers on legal migration, for example, will you?
I mean, it's very clear. It's in our first 6 steps.
How many people do you think...
Well, let him answer. A border security command to secure our borders, to smash the gangs. But what we've got to do around skills and migration is we've got to start investing in the skills of our own people. You asked earlier, where are the people coming from that will fill these jobs? Well, we haven't been investing in the skills. That's why there's so many professions on the shortage occupation list where we invite people to fill those jobs from abroad, because the government hasn't invested in those skills. That's why we're saying we'll reform the apprenticeship levy. That's why we'll change further education colleges to be technical excellence colleges, to invest in the skills that we need, because that is the way we fill the jobs that we need now and the jobs in the future.
Great, but no one will give any numbers.
Right,
no one in your party will give any numbers.
We can come back to immigration in just a moment, because I want to focus on the economic prospectus just for a little bit longer. You've crashed the economy. Liz Truss is mentioned in almost every breath, rightly or wrongly, and certainly it was last night. And do you admit the game's up, really, for the Conservatives?
Well, to be fair, I've said that for a while now. I've said it on this programme, actually. I said that the Conservatives won't win the next election. I've personally
but you haven't,
said that.
You haven't repeated this line, which was mentioned, or rather stated clearly, repeatedly, on Politics Live by Geoffrey Cox, the former Attorney-General. It's on the front page of the Daily Mail. A Tory wipeout risks one-party socialist state. I mean, you're laughing. What, laughing because it's not going to be socialist, or laughing because...
Both. It's not. I mean, it's not going to be a socialist state, and it's not going to, we shouldn't want a one-party state.
Have you been instructed
I've not been instructed by anybody. I'm stepping down. I'm not part of the election campaign. Obviously supporting my local candidate, and it's really important that we do fight for every vote. And why is that important? But one, because we do need a strong opposition. You need strong local voices in those particular areas that there as well. And obviously, the Conservative Party does need to change. I've said this for a few months now. They need to take a step back, show a bit of humility, actually regroup and work out what kind of Conservative Party they want to be. And that's important. But that's really important for the country as well as the party. Country
I mean,
first.
this is quite a big deal. Are you literally admitting the game's up?
Well, I said it about 3 months ago. I'm not sure why.
He has. He said it here, but I just wanted to...
I think it bears repetition in the middle of an election campaign.
Well, look, I'm not standing in the campaign. I'm not standing in this campaign.
I know you're not, but it's not about you, is it?
But look, one of the things Rishi has talked about a lot is about maths, right? And I did maths A-level, I did a statistics A-level. I can see when the Labour Party are 20 points ahead, I can sort of work out it's likely to be a Labour victory. However, what you then need to do is you need to look at each seat individually. So we've got to be, I can't sit here and not be honest with viewers by saying something else, frankly. But it doesn't mean that every vote is not worth fighting for.
Right, but hang on, Paul. Is that why there has been a change in the arguments and the lines being put out by Geoffrey Cox yesterday, by Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary, saying that we mustn't hand a blank cheque or a super majority? Is that now? Do you see that now as the sort of campaign?
It seems to be a few people saying that. I mean, as I say, I've been saying this for a little while, and I'm not part of that instruction, so I don't know. But it seems to be a theme there,
right?
And it's it's possibly not the strongest.
Although I don't remember anyone saying you should be worried about that when Boris Johnson won an 80 or so seat majority. You say you've got to have a healthy opposition.
Well, you do need a healthy opposition. I think that's for functional democracy. I think that's actually, if we'd had a functional Parliament from 2017 to 2019, actually, when it was very close. That was one of the biggest issues that's caused us this, was the 2 years of hiatus between 17 and 19. And then it swung the other way, but of course COVID came and hit.
All right,
quickly.
well, let's go back to growth. What levels of growth do you need if you win the election to deliver on all your promises?
Well, we need higher growth than we've got at the moment.
What levels?
But I don't know the precise figure about what we need. But if we had the growth levels that we had under the last
Labour
government...
It's right at the heart of your agenda,
It is.
so you should, respectfully, you should know.
And that is
right at the heart of your agenda.
Let's see if we can have a go again. What are the levels? I mean, you know, they're right, the others. I mean, if it is at the heart, wealth creation, prosperity, growth is going to deliver... I've got the long list of pledges here, all costed. But what sort of levels of growth are we talking about?
Well, I think we want to get back to the levels of growth that we saw under the last Labour government, because if we had that levels of growth now, if we had that levels of growth, and as you know, Isabel, it's around 2.5%-ish under the last Labour government, the world is a different place now, and we're inheriting a set of finances that are appalling in terms of what the Conservatives have done to our economy. So it will take time to fix our economy. But if we had that level of growth over the last 14 years, we'd have tens of billions of pounds extra to spend on our public services.
You're not cutting services, so therefore you're just relying on growth to bring in revenue, but you're being really unspecific about what rates they are and when it's going to happen.
It's the central plank of our manifesto.
Exactly, and you don't know when it's going to. You don't know when it's going to happen.
Well, let me time frame. I think voters are entitled to ask roughly what time frame for you to get to that ambitious, that golden future of 2%.
Of 2.5%. Let's say 2.5%.
I mean, the impressive countries in the world are going way, way greater guns than that.
Do you know when we last had growth? And I put the pandemic to one side because obviously the economy sank to minus 10.4% in 2020, and then it did have a bounce back. But the last time in the last 14 years we went to 2.5% or just over 2.5% of growth annually.
I think it's under the last Labour government.
No, it did get there in 2017. In 2014, it was 3.2%. Right. That was, of course, coming back after the recession. And that's it since 2010. So how
but it has to be sustained
So you're not on top of those figures. You didn't know what the growth rate was in the way that you've just been told, and you haven't given us even a rough time frame for when your ambition.
Let's be clear. The manifesto is all about delivering the growth. We've also set out...
Sounds brilliant.
It's going to be an incredibly difficult time because the economic inheritance is appalling. We want sustained growth. What Jo spoke about was just bips every now and then. What we need is sustained growth. The last period of sustained growth was under the last Labour government. That's why we need to cut
before we had a financial meltdown.
Building again.
Before we had a financial meltdown and we had to repair the public finances at that time with a massive structural deficit.
Yeah, but you haven't achieved great growth over those 14
years.
No,
absolutely, because you have 150 billion pounds worth of deficit. You've got to do something pretty radical.
Let's look at something else that you haven't managed to actually eat into, and that's hospital waiting lists. And in fact, this morning, BBC News reporting England's hospital waiting lists rise again to 7.57 million. I mean, it is only a slight rise, but it's a slight rise on 7.5 million waiting, if not people, certainly for treatments, waiting on the NHS. That's another failed pledge. How disappointed are you by that failure to meet the pledge that Rishi Sunak says we will be bringing down that waiting list?
Well, clearly it's disappointing. I mean, I think there are plenty of reasons when you have the NHS was on its knees after COVID. There was a lot of repairing that had to be done over that point. But not at those levels. And if you look at where the worst waiting lists are, they're in Wales, Labour-run Wales. So this is something that everybody has to take a degree of responsibility for.
Right. Well,
I think it's utterly unforgivable. I honestly do. I mean, we heard at the Labour launch today a gentleman who's got terminal cancer, and he has been kept waiting. He said that if he had only been treated in a timely fashion, he might not actually have a terminal diagnosis. I am sorry, but can you not admit that those waiting lists are an absolute travesty?
I've said they're way too high. I've said they're way too high.
Let's have a look at what Labour is proposing to solve it. An increase in provision from the private sector to help clear the backlog in the NHS. Do you support that to get rid of the backlog?
No, it's a waste of resources. And I'll tell you why. Because the largest private sector provider in this country spends and has the capacity for what the NHS does in 36 hours. We do not have a massive private sector health industry, whether you like that or not, in this country. It's very small.
Capacity in
it's
the private sector.
Very little capacity.
Massive, and they're much more efficient.
They're not much more efficient.
Hang on.
Sorry,
let him set out his stall. But you have got two competing. Two competing. Right, go on. You go first.
The National Audit Office did a review into the last time Labour did this, the independent sector treatment centres, and they were found to be less efficient than the NHS. And they took the easiest cases because they haven't got A&E, they haven't got all the resources.
But we're talking about a backlog here of pretty rudimentary complementary treatments in many cases.
And this doesn't even touch the sides. So better thing to do would be to expand NHS capacity permanently.
With more money.
Rather, of course. Well, you're going to give money to put into the private sector. Yeah. The other problem with expanding the private sector is the private sector poaches NHS staff to work in it. So by giving them more money, you reduce NHS sector.
But you said you've got no private sector capacity. And then 5 years ago, you were throwing the thing as we were privatising the NHS. I mean, you can't have it both.
Labour did this very successfully, in fairness.
Do you support the idea of much more private sector involvement to clear them up?
I don't care who provides it. I just want people to get their treatment. I think we've got to be pragmatic. Unfortunately, Labour is incredibly ideological about this sometimes. We heard Sir Keir Starmer saying he wouldn't use private treatment, private healthcare, even if one of his own family members was in a very bad way, he still wouldn't use private healthcare.
Luke?
What? I mean, what kind of
I'm the recipient
man or
of amazing.
husband
I'm the recipient of amazing NHS care of the last year with treatment for cancer for myself.
Not everyone is.
I know there is a huge number of people on those NHS backlogs, and that clogs up not only our entire National Health Service, it reduces growth in our economy, people being at home in pain rather than being able to work. That's why we've set out using spare capacity and also expanding the number of evening and weekend appointments, 40,000 extra appointments. We're taking the best of the NHS to the rest of the NHS, as Wes would like to say. St James's in Leeds and Guy's and St Thomas in London are already working their capacity faster, using NHS staff to cut down their waiting list. That's what we want to see rolled out everywhere. But look, 40,000 extra appointments will take an entire parliament to wear down that nearly 8 million that are on an NHS waiting list. But if we don't do that, and if we don't fix primary care, and if we don't fix the NHS dental deserts, I'm afraid the NHS won't be able to keep going the way it is.
Well, just before we move on, I just want to remind our viewers that Nick Robinson, BBC's Nick Robinson, will be interviewing Keir Starmer tonight as part of the series of... No, it's tomorrow night. I nearly got it wrong. Tomorrow night, sorry, that's Friday at 7:30 on BBC One and the iPlayer. The Panorama interviews, part of a series of interviews that Nick Robinson is doing. That is with the Labour leader this evening. Now, we are going to go to Lancashire and catch up with our BBC reporter there, Jim Connolly, who I think is in Clitheroe Market and going to be talking to voters there. Over to you, Jim.
That's right, Jo. We're in Clitheroe Market. We came here basically because we found this place the other week when we were doing a story about vet prices. And we thought, well, it knocks out a fairly decent butty and a brew, so it'd be a good place to come when the election gets going. The guy behind it's up for a chat in a minute, but let me just give you a little flavour of what Clitheroe's like. It's a fairly affluent town. It's in an area which I came through this morning, which is quite rural. There's pockets of deprivation as you travel around the area, like there is across the country. And politically, it's interesting too. It's a Conservative area in the past. It's gone through boundary changes at the minute, so we're seeing a different set of people standing for the area. And it's an area that if Labour is to make the gains that it's said to do in the polls, it needs to win places like this. So Labour are looking hard on this place. The Tories are looking to defend it. And we've also got reform, which keeps getting mentioned all day this morning to us as we bob around the market. Well, we're now going to head up and chat to Anthony because he knows what people are talking about in the town. Anthony, thanks for having us down.
No problem at all.
Tell us, is the election the talk of the Horsebox Cafe?
It's not the main topic of conversation because obviously we've got the Euros coming up, which, you know, is my passion. But there's a lot of people who do kind of want to get me involved in the politics of, you know, what's going on at the moment. Do I want to get involved? Do I want to tell them my opinion? Like we said earlier on, I don't want to lose custom. But it is definitely a top two of the conversation.
But what's the thrust of it? What do people want to hear from the politicians?
People want to hear that what they're going to do locally, not just down south, not just even further than down south, what they're going to do up the northwest, what they're going to do in the Ribble Valley, because at the moment there's not really that much being said what's going to happen in the Ribble Valley. So, and I think the feedback that I get from customers is kind of, I don't know who to vote for because I don't know who's going to do what for the Ribble Valley or the northwest. Some people are saying they'll stay with the Conservatives. Some people are kind of saying they want to change. But I think the key point for the northwest and again the Ribble Valley is that what are these politicians, what the manifesto is going to do for the Ribble Valley.
Is it all right if I go and have a quick word with some of your customers?
Absolutely, go and walk around and have a word.
Nice one. Right, we'll just head down here. Excuse me. Can I ask, whilst you're having a quick brew and a cigarette there, that's all right, which way are you thinking when it comes to the election? What's exciting you this time around?
Very little. It's really just going to be a case of seeing how large the Labour majority is and how the Conservative Party rips itself apart. That'll be fun to watch afterwards.
And which way do you normally vote?
Labour.
And is that the way you're going to go this way, do you think?
Yeah.
You don't sound mega enthusiastic when you said that. It's a bit of a
well, there's very little to get excited about. I mean, we've all heard about the manifesto this morning, and it's really Starmer really not trying to put a foot wrong before the election. You know, it's like, oops, be careful sort of thing. You know, there's no real vision in there. It's all tinkering on the edges. You know, we've got potholes and we've got national service. Seriously, you know.
Well, thanks very much. Let's see if anyone else fancies a quick chat. Can I ask, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm worried that what they say in the manifesto is not necessarily what they'll carry out if they are elected. And so you really don't know who to trust and who to believe.
Who do you normally vote for?
Conservative, but I won't be this time.
Really?
No.
So where do you think your vote might go?
That is difficult, really difficult to say, and I haven't made up my mind yet. I just know it won't be Conservative.
What are the issues that you want to hear the politicians?
I think the state of the NHS is a biggie. And also people on the breadline who can't afford to put food on the table. The thought of children going to school hungry just breaks my heart. And it's third world stuff and it shouldn't be.
Well, I'll let you get on with your brew, and I'll just
you.
pop along to this guy here. You're quite typical of a lot of people I've met down at the market. Yeah. Which way do you normally vote, and which way going forward?
As a youngster, I always voted Labour. I changed to Conservative, and now I'll never vote for either of them two parties again, unless they change.
So who's it going to be for you?
Reform for me.
And what's the issues that drive you towards reform?
Because the other two parties just lie to us, right, left and centre. Look at the immigration. Look at boats coming in. Everybody wants to do something about it, but nobody will do anything about it. State of country as a whole, I've heard your comments from other people, local issues, everything. I could not trust Tories or Labour, or as we call them, Liber, with my vote again.
Well, Joe, what we've heard there is very typical of the people that I've met down here this morning. And look, it is just a snapshot. We're talking here in a market, middle of the afternoon. It's not representative of everyone in Clitheroe, but it does give you a snapshot of how people are feeling and the issues that are getting people going. And if you want a full list of who's standing in this area, you can find out more on the BBC News website.
Well, Jim, thank you very much. It was fascinating. You really got them talking to you and engaged in terms of what's actually going on. But anyway, enjoy the rest of the day there. In terms of, and by the way, you can see the candidates here, Pendle and Clitheroe candidates standing in this election. Two things really struck me. One is trust. LIBOR, they're calling that gentleman, calling Labour. And then the Conservative, probably lifelong Conservative woman, not going to vote Conservative again. What's happened to trust in politics?
Well, look, I think in terms of the Conservatives, I talked a little bit about the mistakes before, but clearly what you're seeing around with the European elections we've just had, there's a lot of anti-incumbency, with people holding the COVID baby, if you like. When you put £408 billion out to support the economy, you're going to need it back in some way, shape or form. And that's the difficult bit. It's partly that, as you see from other elections. But then if you look at, trust in the manifesto, we've seen Keir Starmer flip-flopping a number of times over the years. Since he stood on a platform to become leader, he then ditched pretty well all of that. Isabel talked about the question that he said he wouldn't support one of his relatives using private healthcare. I don't believe that for a second. If it came to it, clearly most people would do whatever it took to have a close relative become better again if they're seriously ill.
Right.
I mean, again,
you can't really lecture on trust, can you?
Well,
because your party, time and again, has breached massive manifesto promises.
Yes, but
we've had COVID. We've had
let me just get something to do with immigration.
What did you make of what you heard
hospitals.
from those voters?
I mean, that sounds very similar to the doors that I'm knocking on in the southwest. Trust is through the floor, and that is a direct result of Partygate. That's a direct result of lying to Parliament. That's a direct result of a whole host of actions the government's taken. And because the economy got crashed, we've had to update our pledges to make sure that only what we are promising can we deliver, not having uncosted, unfunded promises as the Tories are. So you've got to find a way of doing that. And I think the first step is delivering what you promise. And if you can do that, you stand a chance of rebuilding trust slowly.
You've got to speak it clearly.
I think there's two things. I mean, one, I think you have to Paul, have to reflect on the fact you promised 300,000 homes a year. You didn't deliver that. 40 new hospitals, didn't deliver that. Protect the triple lock, you got rid of that.
When did we say about 40 new hospitals? By 2030. We said by 2030.
And how many have been built so far? About 5?
By 2030.
But Andrew, what did you make of what people said? Were you surprised?
No, not at all, because it reflects all the conversations I have when I'm walking around my local area. People haven't got trust in politics. They don't believe what politicians say, and they've got good reason to. They've lied to them time and time again. So I understand it. It's very frustrating. I don't think it's a healthy situation. I don't revel in it at all. But I think Labour at this election, I understand what Luke has said in terms of, look, they're being very cautious, they're not over-promising. I get that, but you also have to be honest about the state of the country and what it takes to put it right. And that is why I think people look at what Labour's been offering today and think, well, that isn't going to solve all the problems. That isn't even going to solve them in the long term.
It's a pretty good start,
and
though.
So,
I mean, compared to what we've had, I'm going to
it'll be better than what we've got. I agree with
that.
that, but it's not going to solve the backlog in social care. There's no real plan for social care in there. That's a huge part of the NHS waiting list.
Can I just come to you about one of the things that one of the...
and be honest about it's going to take more money.
Can you win an election doing that?
Of course you can. Of course you can. Well, you look at the polling, actually.
Give me an election where politicians were promising to put taxes up in the election campaign.
And then won.
Yeah, I mean, look, I couldn't
it doesn't matter.
Off the top of my head.
Well, I mean, it's just sort of illustrative in that sense. But look, there was one other thing that was mentioned there, very little to get engaged in because it's going to be a large Labour majority. Is that a risk? A risk that people assume that that's what's going to happen, that voters assume?
No, I think it's going to be, because I think we've seen it from the by-elections, the local elections, all the polling. It all points to that. You know, the polls haven't been proved wrong in any of the by-elections. They haven't been proved wrong in any of the local council elections. Labour is going to win. Now, the turnout might be interesting, where there's some splintering away to the Liberal Democrats, the Greens and Independents in places. That, again, is an interest, but it's very much the subtext.
Right.
Overall, Labour is going to win. Not with a great deal of enthusiasm and hope, but it is going to win because people want the Tories out, rightly.
Just very briefly, before we move on, one of the gentlemen there said, I'm going to look forward to the Conservatives tearing themselves apart after this election. Is that what you think will happen?
I think if they get sensible leadership that actually wants to manage the party, give them the space they want to reconstitute themselves in many ways, to have the kind of Conservatives that they want rather than lurching one way or another. If they lurch, then we repeat 1997. And that, for me, feels full circle, because I joined the party in 97. I saw what happened at that time.
All right. Well, Plaid Cymru, I said earlier on in the programme, they've launched their election manifesto. We can talk to Liz Saville-Roberts, who was Plaid Cymru's Westminster leader until, of course, Parliament was dissolved. Hello to you, Liz. What's your core offer in this manifesto?
Well, we're calling for fairness and ambition for Wales, and our primary call, because of course this is a cost of living election, it's about the economy which underpins cost of living. We want to make sure that Wales has every opportunity to get every penny of funding that we're due. We're well aware of the fact that the funding arrangements we have don't recognise our need. If need were recognised properly, that would really help us to fund the NHS here in a way that would be better for everybody. And people are really aware that public services now, we've had 14 years of austerity, that they know that the public services, which we all depend upon so much, are failing. And they also see promises from Labour, from the Conservatives.
Yeah.
And with the fiscal policies that they're going to put in place, we know that's going to be 18 billion of further cuts. So looking for other sources of money that we can bring to Wales and spend here in Wales with the interest of communities and people here really matters now.
But Liz, just to let our viewers know, public spending per person in Wales is above the UK average when you compare it to England, for example. Why does Wales justify having more than above the UK average?
OK, this is a figure that is often thrown at us, but very often
it's from the Commons Library.
London as a region has more. London as a region has more money per head of population than Wales does. The issue for us in Wales, and of course we are Plaid Cymru, so we're arguing for our corner here, is that we have an older demographic, we have people retiring here, and we also have the health problems that arise from post-industrial situations of many of our communities. But there are other sources of money that I would like to look to as well. Of course, HS2, which is now even though it's been reduced, remains an England and Wales project. That means that the money that is used to spend on that, none of the equivalent comes to Wales, even though there's not an inch of track in Wales. Now, if that project was redefined, and Welsh Labour government have called for it to be redefined, but Labour in the UK are ignoring it, if it was redefined as an England-Wales project, that would result in £4 billion extra to Wales over its lifetime.
All right.
And another really important area for us is the Crown Estate. If we were to be able to bring in our renewable resources and have the funding spent here, rather than going to the Treasury, as Crown Estate is devolved to Scotland, that, again, could bring us millions of pounds here.
All right, Liz, you've made that very clear. What is your plan for Welsh independence? Bearing in mind that is a cornerstone of Plaid Cymru, because in the 2019 manifesto, you were aiming for independence by 2030. Is that still the case?
We are, of course, Plaid Cymru is recognised, is known, it is core to our identity. We are the party of independence. This time, in the here and now, in this general election, where so much has happened, we've had COVID, we've had Ukraine, we've had world unrest in the meantime, we have to be able to find ways of improving people's lives as they stand in Wales.
Right.
Now, that is a core argument towards independence in the longer run, because we have to be able to prove that we can do things better, make people's lives better with additional devolved powers, and then show that with the additional levers that we would have under independence, that then is the next rational step.
All right, but Liz, you haven't got the levels of support and you don't think you're going to get them anytime soon?
But it's always growing. It's growing amongst younger people. People understand that the nature of the relationship between our Parliament here in Cardiff and Westminster is one of dependency. The sort of devolved settlement that we had in 1999 only allowed us to manage poverty. We see the long-term poverty that is part of the structural inequality of the UK. And if we want better, there must be another way of doing it.
All right. I mean, in terms of other things in the manifesto, it says we should aim for nuclear disarmament. What does that mean in the round when we are facing all sorts of conflicts around the world, particularly with the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
It's a long-standing policy of my party to reject the Trident renewal. And in all honesty, we do not believe that nuclear acts as an effective deterrent. There will be conventional methods, and we must find better ways of building peace in a world which is becoming increasingly dangerous.
OK, Liz, stay with us just for a moment. Andrew, do you have some sympathy with that?
On the nuclear weapons? Yeah, absolutely. And there are a number of retired army generals who have said the same, that actually we would rather that funding went into conventional weapons to defend Britain, weapons that could actually be used. So even from a military tactical point of view, you find a lot of army generals and naval commanders who've retired who come out and say this afterwards. You know, one of them, Lord Ramsbottom, was in the House of Lords for many years, very respected peer. So, yeah, I think that is true. And look, nuclear weapons haven't deterred attacks on this country. Look, Argentina invaded the Falklands. They didn't go, oh my God, they've got nuclear weapons, we're not going to do it. They did it. You know, we've had terrorist attacks on us. They don't do anything against that. They are a waste of massive resource, I'm afraid to say.
Luke?
Labour's in favour of renewing our nuclear deterrent, building the 4 new nuclear submarines that we need in Barrow and making sure they're upgraded over the course of their lifetime. We also are in favour of filling the capability gaps that exist in our conventional forces. We know that we've given lots of military equipment, quite rightly, to Ukraine, but that's left our forces with capability gaps, falling morale, frankly, military housing that no one should be living in, with black mould, leaky boilers and leaky roofs. So we do need to make sure that we're investing in. That's why Labour's in favour of increasing defence spending to 2.5% of our GDP.
But we don't know by when.
Well, with the defence review in the first year of a Labour government, that will set out the journey as to how we get there. Importantly, what sequence do we spend it on, and how can we spend more of that money on British companies rather than saying those contracts abroad?
Paul, just on the finances, should Wales get more money?
I think what we've got to see with Wales is them spending their money on the NHS more wisely. So they've got the worst results for the NHS anywhere in the country. The fact that they've cut...
England's aren't great, are they?
No, but it's still worse in Labour-run Wales. And the 20-mile-an-hour project that Mark Drayford wasted his money on, that he then had to reverse, is another example where they're actually not spending their money well at the moment under a Labour-run government.
Right. Isabel?
I'm really sorry, I zoned out. I thought an interview was so dreary, it was so uninspiring. It was all about how we can get money from someone else. Who's going to vote
I
for
must
that?
try
Sorry.
better when it comes to Plaid
I didn't
Cymru.
mean
Thank
you.
you.
I meant you're
It's all we
interviewing.
have time for. Thank you to all of my guests today on the day that not just Plaid Cymru, but of course Labour launched its manifesto there in Manchester. From all of us here, bye-bye.